My family wrote in the group chat that you no longer need to come home, that no one needs you. It happened on a Sunday morning. One of those dull, gray ones where the sky looks like it forgot how to be anything but tired. I wasn't woken by an alarm, I stopped setting those a long time ago. Instead, I stirred from a shallow sleep because of the dryness in my mouth and a cold draft sneaking through the cracked window. My apartment was as silent as ever, the kind of silence that wraps around your bones, not comforting but suffocating. My phone was on the nightstand, face up. The screen lit up from a notification just as I rolled onto my side. For a second, my stomach dropped. A message? That alone was unusual. I hadn't received a message from my family in, well, it must have been years. Maybe a birthday reminder from my brother 2 years ago, short and typed out like a chore. Happy birthday. Hope you good. No warmth. No follow-up. But this wasn't from one person. This was from the group chat. The one labeled family, ironic, if you think about it. I don't know why I never left it. I guess part of me hoped someone would say something human in there one day. But what I saw instead was worse than the silence. You don't have to come back. No one's waiting for you anymore. It's been 10 years. We've all moved on. You should too. Please don't reach out again. It's better this way. That was it. 3 consecutive messages. No name attached. But I didn't need one. I knew who typed that. I sat up slowly, my body heavier than it should have been. Not from sleep, but from the weight behind those words. My eyes traced each line over and over, as if I could decode a hidden message. Maybe sarcasm. Maybe a joke. But there was nothing hidden there. Just dismissal. Finality. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even throw the phone like I used to when things cracked open inside me. Instead, I placed it gently back down and stared at the ceiling for a long while. The hum of the fridge. The distant barking of a dog. The sound of my own breath, slow and almost reluctant. That was all. 10 years ago, I left home. Or maybe I was pushed out. The memory is fuzzy in parts, sharp in others. I was 21. Angry. Tired. Not just with them, but with myself. My parents never understood that. They thought I was rebellious, dramatic, selfish. Maybe I was. But there was more to it than that. It started with the usual things, arguments about money, about pulling my weight, about respect. But it wasn't just shouting. It was silence afterward. Weeks of pretending nothing happened. Or worse, passive-aggressive smiles over dinner, forced laughter that never reached anyone's eyes. I remember one night in particular. I came home late. I'd taken a walk after work, just to clear my head, to feel like I wasn't drowning. When I opened the door, they were all sitting in the living room. My mom, dad, sister, and brother. Not watching TV. Not talking. Just sitting. Like they were waiting. I remember the way my father looked at me, not angry, not disappointed. Just tired. Like he'd already given up. My mom didn't say a word. My sister avoided my eyes. And my brother, he shook his head, like he pitied me. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of the end. I packed my things the next day. No dramatic exit. No shouting. Just bags zipped up, doors closed quietly. I left a note. It said, I need time. Don't wait up. They never called. Never texted. The message today was the first real thing I'd heard from them since. And what a message it was. I should have seen it coming, maybe. Over the years, I saw small signs. My mom stopped liking my posts on social media. My sister got married, and I only found out because of a tagged photo someone else posted. My brother stopped replying to my rare texts. I tried once, 5 years ago, to come back for Christmas. I took a bus to my hometown, 3 hours each way. I didn't tell them. I thought maybe surprising them would spark something. Like in the movies. I stood outside the house. The lights were on. I could hear laughter. But I didn't knock. I just stood there, watching them through the window. They looked happy. Whole. Like I'd never existed. I turned around and walked back to the station. And now, this message. As if to confirm what I had already known, deep down. I don't know what they think I've been doing for the past decade. Maybe they believe I failed. Maybe they hope I did. Maybe that makes it easier for them to justify forgetting me. But I didn't fail. I survived. It wasn't pretty. I worked 3 jobs at one point. Slept in a friend's car for a few months. Went without food for longer than I'd like to admit. But eventually, I clawed my way up. Found a rhythm. Found a home, even if it was small and quiet and lonely. And yes, I sent money. Once a year. On my mother's birthday. I never signed my name. Just sent cash with a simple card. I never knew if she even opened them. But I did it anyway. Because despite everything, they were still my family. And now they weren't. I made coffee that morning, still in a daze. My hands moved on their own. Pour the water. Add the grounds. Stir. Wait. The phone was still on the nightstand. I kept glancing at it, half expecting the messages to vanish, like a bad dream. But they stayed. Pinned in place like a dagger. I wondered what sparked it. Why now? After 10 years of silence, why this? Did something happen? Was someone sick? Or were they just cleaning house? I sipped my coffee. It tasted like ash. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Part of me wants to reply. Part of me wants to write something cruel, to match their coldness. But what would that fix? Nothing. The damage is old. Rotten. And this was just the final crack. Still, I opened the chat. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. But I didn't type. I just stared. Until the screen went dark. That day stretched on like a shadow, long, quiet, and formless. I didn't leave the apartment. Didn't check the mailbox. Didn't answer the few emails waiting in my inbox from clients who wouldn't notice if I disappeared. I just existed. Saturday. Walked from one end of the apartment to the other. Stared at the walls. At nothing. That message didn't just arrive out of nowhere, it landed. Like a rock through a frozen lake, cracking the surface of something I'd spent years convincing myself was solid. Turns out, it was always thin. By the time evening came, I'd read it at least 100 times. My eyes memorized the phrasing, the punctuation, the line breaks. I could hear it in their voices, my mother's soft, overly polite tone, as if she was doing me a favor by saying goodbye. My brother's flat, indifferent delivery. My sister, likely silent in the background, complicit in her quiet. 10 years. It never felt like a clean break. It was more like a wound that kept reopening, then closing unevenly. A jagged scar that itched when I saw families in restaurants. When I passed someone in the street who looked like my father from a distance. When I dreamed, rarely, about sitting at our old kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the floor like it used to before everything fell apart. They say time heals. That's a lie people tell each other to keep going. Time doesn't heal. It hides things under dust until you forget where they're buried. But a message like that? It brushes everything clean in a second. It's strange, the things that come back when your mind has nowhere else to go. I remembered being 16. The first real fight. My dad found a journal I'd been keeping. Not one of those teenage angst ones full of drawings and dreams, this one was real. It had anger in it. Confessions. Questions about why I always felt like the odd one out. Why they talked about me in the third person when I was in the room. Why my brother got praised for every half effort and I got silence for trying twice as hard. He read it. Not just a page. All of it. I came home from school, and it was lying open on the kitchen table. He was standing by the sink, arms crossed. Mom was crying. My sister was upstairs. My brother had his headphones in like always. He didn't yell. That would have been easier. Instead, he said, "If that's how you feel about us, maybe you don't belong here after all." That line hit harder than anything. It was the kind of sentence that doesn't sound cruel until you hear the echo of it every time you try to call somewhere home again. I said nothing. I picked up the journal. Threw it in the trash. And I remember he didn't stop me. The next few years were tense, like living inside a balloon about to pop. We smiled for visitors. Took the family photo every Christmas. But inside, I was miles away from them. I got a job. Saved money. Applied to schools they didn't approve of. Picked a city they hated. Left a month before they expected. That was 10 years ago. And I spent every one of those years pretending I didn't care that they never called to ask if I got there safely. After the message, I thought I'd feel rage. Maybe relief. But instead, I just felt tired. Not sleepy. Just worn out. Like the fight had finally ended, but I wasn't sure who had won, or if there had even been a fight at all. Maybe they gave up long ago, and I was the only one still standing on the battlefield, looking around for ghosts. I went to the kitchen and pulled down the old box I kept above the fridge. Inside were the cards. 10 of them, neatly stacked. One for each year. Each sent to my mother on her birthday. Blank on the front. Blank on the inside, except for the cash tucked between the folds. No note. No name. I always wondered if she recognized the handwriting on the envelope. If she opened it at all. This year, I didn't send one. I forgot, to be honest. Or maybe I just stopped needing to pretend. The next morning, I tried to distract myself. Did laundry. Cleaned the windows. Answered 2 work emails. Even considered going out, maybe grabbing a coffee. But every time I reached for my keys, I heard the message again in my mind. You don't have to come back. The thing about being told you're not needed is that part of you already suspected it. But hearing it, reading it, makes it real. Unavoidable. So instead, I sat down at my desk and opened a blank document. Not to write back. Not to explain myself. Just to see what would come out. The cursor blinked, waiting. And then, slowly, words appeared. 10 years ago, I left home because I thought maybe I didn't belong. Today, I know I don't. I kept writing. Memories spilled out like water through a broken dam. I wrote about the night I slept on a park bench because I missed the last train home. About the girl I almost fell in love with but pushed away because I didn't know how to let people stay. About waking up some mornings and forgetting, for a few blissful seconds, that I was alone. And about the part of me that still waited, like a fool, for someone in that group chat to say, "Come home." But they didn't. They told me not to. And I would listen. Later that evening, I walked to the store. The city was buzzing, people weaving through each other like nothing in the world could touch them. I envied them, in a distant sort of way. I bought bread, coffee, a pack of gum I wouldn't chew. At the counter, the cashier asked if I wanted a bag. No, I said. Simple. Like I'd just made peace with something. But peace doesn't feel like joy. It feels like surrender. The next few days passed like fog. Not dense enough to stop me from moving, but thick enough to dull everything around me. I went through the motions. Ate when I remembered. Showered because the staleness started to bother even me. Worked, answered emails, said all the right words in Zoom calls with strangers who knew nothing about me. That part was easy. Pretending had become second nature. I think the strangest thing was how unchanged everything looked. The streets were the same. The people in my building still avoided eye contact in the elevator. The city kept humming, indifferent to my unraveling. Even my apartment, as small and plain as it was, didn't reflect the quiet implosion inside me. The dishes still sat in the rack. The blankets still folded neatly on the couch. My plants, surprisingly, were still alive. But something inside had shifted. Subtly. Like a piece of furniture moved a few inches overnight. You wouldn't notice right away, but eventually, you'd trip over it in the dark. One evening, I sat on the balcony with a cigarette I didn't light. I used to smoke back when things got bad. Quit 3 years ago. I kept one cigarette in the drawer ever since, not to smoke, but to remind myself I could stop. But now I wasn't so sure what the point was anymore. It was getting cold. Early fall. The kind of cold that doesn't bite, just whispers. The streets below were starting to glow with that amber streetlight haze. A couple passed under me, laughing about something. Their closeness looked alien. And then I thought, what would happen if I just vanished? Not dramatically. No letters. No final words. Just silence. Disappear into the sea of people who don't leave ripples. Would they notice? Would anyone? I remembered another time. I must have been 15. I'd forgotten to do the dishes. My father didn't shout, not at first. He sat at the table, waited until I came downstairs, and just said, "You don't care about anyone but yourself, do you?" I stood there, hands still damp from washing them upstairs. I didn't know what to say. I had forgotten. But the way he said it, it wasn't about dishes. It was about something deeper. Something he'd decided long ago. That I was the selfish one. The cold one. The one who never quite fit. After that, I started writing notes to myself. On scraps of paper. Just small things. You're not the villain. Not everything is your fault. They don't see you. That doesn't mean you're invisible. I'd find them years later, tucked in books, old jeans, beneath the bed. I don't know if they helped. But I kept writing them, even in my 20s. Until I didn't need reminders anymore. Or maybe until I stopped believing them. A week passed since the message. No follow-up. No clarification. Not that I expected one. But there was something unbearable about the silence that followed. Like they said their piece, dropped the weight, and moved on. Meanwhile, I was left holding it, trying to figure out where to set it down. That's the part no one tells you about being cut off. It doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like someone ripped out a root and left you dangling. Not dead. But not growing, either. I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Silence. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years. Hey. It was Mark. My cousin. I hadn't spoken to him since I left. We were close as kids. He was the only one who ever pulled me aside during family dinners and asked, "Are you okay?" in a way that sounded like he meant it. "Hey," I said back, unsure, my voice suddenly dry. I saw the message. My heart stopped. So it wasn't just sent to me. I didn't know they'd actually send it, he added. I thought they were just talking. Like always. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just wanted to say. I don't agree with it. Any of it. He sounded nervous. Like he wasn't supposed to be calling. Thanks, I said. My voice cracked. There was a pause, then, "You still in the city?" "Yeah. I'm around. If you ever want to get a drink or something." I didn't say yes. Didn't say no. I just nodded, forgetting he couldn't see me. "I'm sorry, man," he said before hanging up. "You didn't deserve that." It took me a long time to process that call. The idea that someone, anyone, might still see me. Might not have written me off with the rest. But part of me didn't trust it. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't trust myself to believe it. I'd spent so long building armor, I didn't know how to take it off without bleeding. Still, that night, I opened the group chat again. The message was still there. Final. I hovered over the reply button. Just one word formed in my head. Understood. But I didn't send it. Instead, I backed out. Deleted the chat. Not to forget. Just so I wouldn't stare at it anymore. 3 days passed before I messaged Mark. It wasn't planned. I didn't rehearse the words or check my spelling 3 times like I used to when reaching out to people who mattered. I just opened the message thread and typed. "Still around. Coffee?" He responded a few minutes later. "Name the place." We met at a small cafe near the river, the kind of place that felt too clean, too curated, white walls, potted plants, indie music humming under the clink of cups. I got there early. Sat by the window. Watched people walk by with their lives intact. When Mark walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. His face had thickened slightly with age. His beard was fuller. But his eyes, those were the same. Sharp, cautious, a little tired. Like mine. He walked straight over and sat down without a hug, which I appreciated. "Hey," he said, casual. "Hey." A beat passed before either of us said more. "You look good," he said, and for a second, I thought he meant it. "You too," I replied. It wasn't a lie. We ordered coffee, then sat in silence for a while. The kind that wasn't uncomfortable, just fragile. "I wasn't sure you'd answer," he said finally. I wasn't sure you were real, I said. That made him laugh. Fair. We sipped. Looked anywhere but at each other for a few seconds. I didn't know they were gonna send that message, he said. Your mom was talking about it for a while, but I figured she wouldn't actually go through with it. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to ask why no one stopped her. He must have sensed the thought anyway. It's weird, he said. They talk about you like a ghost. Like you're this thing that haunts them but isn't real anymore. Guess that makes sense. Ghosts don't talk back. Mark looked at me for a moment. They never really knew how to talk to you. Even when we were kids. You scared them a little, I think. That surprised me. I scared them? You were quiet. You saw things they didn't. They didn't like that. Made them uncomfortable. I didn't know what to do with that. So I changed the subject. You talk to them often? He shrugged. Not really. I keep my distance. Christmas, weddings, that kind of thing. Your brother tried to rope me into some family event a year ago. I said I was busy. He didn't ask again. We both chuckled at that. Quiet, broken laughter. I used to think if I made enough progress, I said slowly, they'd reach out. That if I got my life together, they'd suddenly care again. Mark leaned back in his chair. They were never waiting for you to fix yourself. They were waiting for you to become someone else. That landed hard. We sat with it for a moment. It was one of those sentences that hurt because it was true. We talked for another hour. Nothing heavy. Just catching up. Work, weather, books we pretended to read. It was easy. Not warm, not nostalgic. But bearable. And real. Before we parted, he said, I'm glad you're still here. I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything back. He paused at the door. Don't let their silence trick you into thinking you were wrong to leave. Then he was gone. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about that conversation. Thinking about what Mark said. About ghosts. About becoming someone else. It made me wonder, who had I become? Not the version of me they wanted. Not the good son who smiled on cue and asked how everyone's day was while quietly rotting from the inside. But not angry, either. Not anymore. Just tired. Quiet. Resigned. And that scared me more than anything. The next morning, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in years. I opened the box of old photos. I kept them not out of sentimentality, but because throwing them away felt like an admission that none of it mattered. Inside were birthdays, blurry vacation shots, Sunday lunches. Faces frozen in time, smiling, holding each other, pretending. I pulled one out. It was me and my sister, building a snowman in the front yard. I must have been 8. She was 12. We were bundled in mismatched coats. I was laughing. Not smiling, actually laughing. I couldn't remember the last time I heard myself do that. Another photo, me and my mom in the kitchen. I was helping her bake. My hands were covered in flour. She was laughing too. Her face soft, not yet worn down by disappointment. Then another, all of us at the table. Thanksgiving, probably. My father carving the turkey. My brother mid-bite. My sister rolling her eyes at something. Me, looking at the camera, half smiling. I put them all back, one by one. Then I closed the box. Not because I was done. But because I couldn't decide if those moments were real or just better lit. Later that day, I went for a walk. No destination. Just moving. I ended up by the river. Sat on a bench and watched the water drift by. Fast, but aimless. Like it was going somewhere just to avoid stopping. There was a kid nearby throwing stones. His mom stood close, distracted by her phone. The kid looked up at me once, smiled for no reason, then went back to throwing stones. It felt like the most honest interaction I'd had all week. That night, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I wrote another note. Not on a phone. Not typed out. Just pen and paper. I didn't address it. I didn't sign it. It simply said, I'm still here. I never stopped being here. You just stopped looking. Then I folded it, placed it in a drawer, and turned off the light. It had been almost 2 weeks since the message. 2 weeks since that quiet, digital dismissal, the line drawn, the door closed. It still sat with me, like a stone in my chest. Not sharp anymore, not cutting. Just heavy. A weight I'd grown used to carrying. But something else had shifted too. Not a breakthrough. Not peace. Just space. A clearing, maybe. After the storm flattens everything. The silence in my apartment no longer echoed. It simply existed. Like a roommate I stopped fighting with. I found myself noticing things again. The way the light hit the kitchen counter in the morning. The way the neighbor's cat sat perfectly still on the windowsill across from mine, watching the street like a tiny sentry. I cooked more. Cleaned more. Slept less, but with fewer dreams. I didn't respond to the message. And no one reached out again. I met Mark once more. We didn't talk about the message this time. We talked about music. About the overpriced drinks in the city. About whether the world was getting better or just louder. He asked if I was seeing anyone. I said no. He didn't push. When we parted, he said, "You ever want to get out of here for a while, let me know. I've got space." I didn't say yes. But I didn't pretend to say no, either. That was the thing with people like us, we'd learned how to talk in maybes. One afternoon, I passed by a bookstore. I hadn't been inside one in years. I used to go when I needed to feel surrounded without being touched. Shelves don't judge. Books don't ask questions. I wandered the aisles, ran my fingers over titles I knew I'd never read. Then, without thinking, I bought a blank journal. That night, I opened it and wrote on the first page. Here's what I remember, and here's what I choose to keep. I didn't write a memoir. I didn't write a confession. Just fragments. Glimpses. Half-sentences. A truth without explanation. I thought about my mother more than I admitted. I tried to imagine her reading those birthday cards. If she read them at all. If she knew they were from me. Maybe she did. Maybe that's why they stopped pretending. Or maybe she threw them away. Maybe she felt the same thing I did, too much time had passed. Too many years had piled up in silence. I didn't hate her. I didn't hate any of them. What I felt was harder to name. It was a grief that didn't belong to death. A mourning without a funeral. They were still out there, alive, breathing, eating, waking up each day. And I was here, doing the same. Just not together. One night, I stood on the balcony again. This time, no cigarette. Just me and the wind. The city looked the same. But I didn't. I had changed. Not in the way I used to hope for. I hadn't become better or stronger or whole. But I had survived. Through the silence. Through the forgetting. Through the message. And I was still here. That counted for something. Weeks passed. I didn't delete the photos. I didn't burn the old notes. I didn't pack up and leave. I didn't send any long messages or write any essays about healing. That wasn't how this worked. What I did was simpler. I made coffee each morning. I answered calls when they came. I met Mark for lunch sometimes. I worked. I read. I wrote. I watched the seasons change. I lived. Not in defiance of them. Not in longing for them. Just, beside the memory of them. Sometimes I still hear my father's voice in my head. That line, "If that's how you feel, maybe you don't belong here." For years, it haunted me. Now, I think, maybe he was right. But what he didn't understand is that belonging isn't something you earn by being easy to love. It's something you build, slowly, in the spaces people leave behind. I didn't belong there. But I was learning to belong somewhere. Even if that place was only in my own skin. The last thing I wrote in the journal, months later, was this. They said no one needs me. Maybe they're right. But I'm here anyway. And that has to mean something. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.